All right. Hi, I'm Andrea Day, and I'm the director for the Division of Child Care, and we're very excited to be at the table to talk about streamlining our policies as well. And then I have Philip Smith.
Hello, everyone. Philip Smith. I'm the Assistant Director for the Division of Child Care, and I'm eager to be a part of this discussion.
And I guess, Todd, I'll tag you next.
Morning, Todd Trapp, Director of the Division of Family Support. So glad to talk about these recommendations. I guess we can go to down the line here. Jessica Hinkle.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Hinkle. I work in Division of Family Support, Policy Development Branch Manager. Tanya.
Good morning, Tanya Feast. I'm the branch manager of the Family Self-Sufficiency Branch. Jessica Womack.
Good morning. I'm Jessica Womack. I'm the KTAP Program Assistant Section Supervisor in the Family Self-Sufficiency Branch. I work with Tanya, and I'll pass it to Amandeep.
Good morning. My name is Amandeep. I am the supervisor for the Policy Development Branch under Jessica, and so glad to be here. My department covers SNAP, SNAP Ed, SNAP Outreach, and we also cover KWP. Thank you. And I'll pass it to Reese.
I am Clarissa Singayo. I am a Public Assistance Program Specialist under the Policy Development Branch, and I will pass it on to Shelley.
Good morning, Shelley Carter. I work with SNAP policy in the Policy Development Branch. And who else do we have? Did we skip you, Bobby?
Bobby put her info in the chat, so.
Okay, all right.
I think that's all of us. Believe. So back to you, Lily.
Yeah, Lee and Amanda, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Hey, everybody. I'm Lee Nimitz. I'm Chief of Staff and Senior Vice President at CPE.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Johansson, and I'm the Associate Director for Adult Learning Initiatives here at CPE.
Okay, great. Well, we kind of got into a little bit the policy recommendations. So basically, I'll just back up a little bit and give a quick overview of what we've been working on. This year, we received some funding from the Lumina Foundation to do an equity audit on a topic of our choice. And we chose to look at basic needs supports and kind of specifically access to basic needs supports for students, specifically looking at racial equity, income equity, as well as regional equity, and adult learners were also a special focus of some of the research that we did. So we really started with a data project through KY Stats and looked at our enrollment and then those current students who were receiving public benefits. We looked at their public benefits connected to retention as completion. We also had the opportunity to work on a wonderful grant application that we connected with Todd and his team around. And that helped us dive even deeper to really see the economic outcomes of individuals who graduated from a KCTCS program and had been receiving SNAP. And, you know, we saw that within 1 year, 80% of graduates were either continuing their enrollment in a post-secondary program or they were earning over 200% of the federal poverty line. So it was a good kind of beginning start to some of that economic mobility and financial self-sufficiency outcomes that we're really looking for. From there, we have we did a policy scan with Carrie. And as I mentioned, Carrie Welton is a national consultant working with us. She currently works with the Institute for College Access and Success, and she is their Director of Anti-Poverty and Basic Needs Work. And before that, if you're familiar with the Hope Center, she was a researcher and advocate with the Hope Center as well. So she has a really extensive background. She's worked in over 15 states, helping them on their state policies and just ways to increase accessibility to basic needs supports. So that policy scan led to some recommendations that we shared with Lisa and some folks from your team, kind of touching on SNAP, SNAP ENT, CCAP, KTAP, and potentially some other acronyms that I'm not remembering. And, you know, they were really just a starting point. And the goal was to explore deeper in this conversation what some of the possibilities may be that maybe have lower effort versus higher effort, you know, or just some additional programming opportunities that we may not have tapped into or even thought of in the policy scan. And so wanted to, you know, quick question, Lisa, does your full team, have they been able to review that document? And so kind of we're all coming in with a good sense of what's been shared. Okay, fantastic. So would love to just get your thoughts and turn it right back over to your team on, you know, what have been some of any conversations that you may have had internally about any of the recommendations. Ultimately, our goal is to develop a set of recommendations for our state. And those are coming through our Action Network, which has convened 4 times already, and we have 2 more meetings remaining. A highly productive, highly energetic group, really thinking about the levers that we can pull to move the needle on, I think, college completion and economic mobility for our population. And so we want to make sure that whatever recommendations we put forward are aligned with the cabinet and aligned with your own recommendations and priorities for this work.
Yeah, so, and I'll let Todd dig into this a little deeper in just a second, and Andrea around the childcare pieces. So we did take a look at those, Lily, and we may need a little more time with Carrie. So I'm glad that we're recording this and getting some of the discussion points to her early. So when we do come back together, hopefully she's had a chance to review that and we'll have some additional information for us. But the recommendations, I think we're all on board. It's just figuring out, making sure we understand the recommendation and how to best implement and where we may have some opportunity to implement that. So I'm going to turn it over to Todd to talk specifically about some of the SNAP and the KTAP recommendations and the questions that we have.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Lisa. I think we're certainly in favor of making all the changes we can. And I think, well, my thought was, as far as SNAP's concerned, we've, you know, taken advantage of the flexibilities that have been available to us. So I think there's definitely several of these that, as we discussed them, we really just need a little more information from Carrie and really need to understand what the ask is and what we're trying to gain by some of these recommendations, just so we fully understand that. So I don't know if we want to go line by line. We kind of lined them all out on a Word document here and just pulled them out of the slides. But we can do that, or is that what you think is best for this meeting? Let me see if I can share.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Can you guys see that now?
Mm-hmm.
We can see it, Todd, but it's really small. You can make it any.
Let's see what we can do here. Better?
There we go. Yes.
Okay, so the first item we have average hours worked over the academic period. And we just made some notes here. For a benefits case for KTAP and SNAP and CCAP as well, we do average hours worked. If it's employment, if it's earnings, we do average hours worked over the benefit period, or over the, well, we'll actually verify wages for the prior 2 months. And so we're averaging actual hour, we're using actual pay stubs, or if it's new employment, we're averaging based on what the weekly hours are going to be. And then that, from that calculation, we determine eligibility, and then we determine the benefit amount for SNAP or KTAB, for instance.
So I have a
And
quick question. So like if a student does a benefits eligibility application in, let's say September, right when they start school, and they were probably maybe employed full-time over the summer, they might look like they have a lot of income. But when the school year starts, they might have to reduce their hours down to 15 hours a week, or, they're going to take an on-campus job. Would that kind of a seasonal, because the student might have more of a seasonal work schedule, is that taken into account, or would that would look kind of bad for the certification in September if they were working full-time over the summer to save money?
well, I mean, as their hours reduced, we would reduce that in the eligibility calculation.
But do
Okay.
we do that at the time of application? I think is what Lily is asking. So can the student self-report that they're, yes, during the summer, last 2 months, my income looked like this, but it's going to be, going forward, for the academic period, it's going to look very different. It's going to look like, less hours or no work at all. So, I think it's what you're asking, Lily.
Yeah, but
So I mean, we can't divide 2 months worth of work over 8 months, if that's what the ask is. You understand what I mean? And I don't know that's what I would like to understand, what we're seeking to gain by dividing the hours over the academic period. Is it so that they can meet the requirement to be an eligible student? Is that what it is? That's probably what it is, but I don't know that for sure.
I think that, as we're just looking at our recommendations for moving forward, one of those is probably around universal benefits eligibility screening. And even if that's just for individuals that are receiving a Pell Grant or have an EFC line that might indicate that they're more likely to be eligible. So we would just want to be aware of the policy context in which they're going to have to document their earnings, so that we do this in October or November instead of September, if it's going to adversely affect their eligibility, even though they would significantly benefit from receiving, the SNAP benefit. I understand what your question is though, Todd, and to see what would we gain. And so I think that I'm just noting that the experience of the student might be slightly different than a typical client who would come in, and you might anticipate that they've had something consistent that reflects even the moving forward employment plans as opposed to just the retroactive. But I think that this has been really, it's good. We need Carrie's clarification on how she may have seen other states phrase this and frame this, so that we're increasing the flexibility with the student in mind is just the goal.
Okay. We can certainly be glad to discuss it further with Carrie and see what we can do. I mean, we have to count, what the actual income is going to be. We can't divide it over the period. It has to be month for month what the actual is going to be.
Absolutely.
So we can go on to number 2, I guess, if there's no other questions about that. So expand programs to confer eligibility to include all programs at KCTCS institutions. I left out some punctuation there. Sorry about that. So again, as far as I'm concerned, and I think DFS staff are concerned, the E&T team specifically, we went through a an effort with KCTCS, with with FNS, and the ENT experts in the Southeast region, to confer eligibility through the KCTCS programs, which we have defined in the ENT plan currently. So I don't know of a way to expand upon that. Definitely, we are in favor of that. I mean, we certainly wanted to cast the net as wide as we could when we went through that effort. So if there's a way to expand upon that, we're in favor. We just need to learn more about that if indeed there is something else to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if Reese or anybody has anything else to add, but Reese and Shelley, I think I made a note here just asking if they could check the SNAP state plan. But I don't know that they found anything additional out, but again, this I think does warrant further conversation with Carrie on what she may know about that.
And so one example of how a student is going to run into a couple of barriers here is for some of the approved ENT programs that are selective admission. And so if you are going to apply to be in a nursing program or a program that is an ENT eligible activity, but before you can be enrolled directly into that program, you have to take some of the prereqs or take some of the courses that will allow you to become eligible. While you're doing that part of the program, you're not in an ENT approved program. So that would be maybe a year of a student being on the pathway toward an approved program, but they're not able to receive the benefits because at that time they're doing another component of the program that doesn't line up. So that might be something where if there is any kind of documentation that can be made about a student's plans, where this is going to be aligned and this is the temporary pathway, or this is the pathway to pursue this workforce demand high need area. We want to ensure that those students are also eligible for the benefits if they're financially eligible. That's just one example, but I think that the example that's coming to my mind is maybe Oregon or Washington, where they allow students to just state that this post-secondary program that I am in will lead to employment, and this is my ultimate career goal. And so whatever the path is that they may be on, they can attest that I'm pursuing a BA in communications and I'm doing a transfer pathway, and I ultimately will be financially self-sufficient in the career path of my choice. But, I think that would be a very liberal interpretation, perhaps, of, I know that self-attestation part is the piece, I think, where the students can make their own case to why the program is going to improve their financial self-sufficiency.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that. We take advantage of self-attestation where we can, for certain eligibility factors as well. So that gets us to number 3 there with the self-attestation. So again, we're glad to learn more about this. I think the flip of the example you gave would be a person who is in a 4-year degree, or their goal is a 4-year program, and they're maybe at the community college on that pathway. Well, under the current rules, they would not be an eligible student. But if they pursued, something for 2 years and then transferred to a 4-year, potentially they could be, depending on for that first 2 years. So that's what we're shooting for, is to make all those 4-year programs eligible. I understand that. I just don't know what the path is to that.
Okay. And Todd, just to clarify, this is SNAP ENT that we're talking about, right? It's any student can receive SNAP if they meet the eligibility qualifications, regardless of their program that they're enrolled in, right? It's just the ENT program that's specific program.
SNAP ENT makes a student eligible. So participation in, if the program they're enrolled at the school is defined as a SNAP ENT program, then the student rule does not apply. Okay, so a college student, there, and some folks may have to help me with the finer points of the policy, but most college students are not going to be eligible for SNAP because of the student rule. But if we can define certain programs as approved E&T activities, then we can say, okay, this person is in an approved E&T activity, and that basically it's a loophole to the student rule. And so that's the effort we went through with FNS. I think that was Massachusetts was an example of one of those plans that we looked at. And that's how we got a good portion of the KCTCS programs approved as E&T. They're basically listed in our SNAP employment training state plan. And so that's the process I was referencing that we went through a few years ago to get where we're at with KCTCS and E&T activities now. So the two things go together. Basically, if you're in an approved E&T activity, then it's, you know, much easier for you to be eligible for SNAP as a college student.
Okay.
And I think part of that is because it's only certain programs, and I guess her policy recommendation is to include all college programs, not, you know, the 2-year, 4-year degree. And by self-attesting that those programs will lead to better, will lead to employment, then that possibly could count as accountable activity or component, educational accountable component, so that, again, that goes, that bypasses that student rule. I guess that's the reason, or that's the recommendation, is that if we can get these 2-year, 4-year programs, students to self-attest that their education will lead to employment, then that counts as accountable component, and they be eligible for SNAP. Shelley had sent me some information that, you know, right now is just allowable only educational components that directly enhance the employability of the participants are allowable. So again, if we can get this 2-year, if we can get the self-attestation approved, then the 2-year, 4-year program may be able to be eligible for SNAP if they can say, yes, my course, my 4-year degree will enhance if we can accept that self-attestation. I didn't know if Shelley wanted to add anything else.
Now, I am going to do some more research on this, Reese. But you know, I think there's a little leeway there that we can try to work with within the federal policy.
Good deal. You guys keep doing that, and we'll follow up with Carrie too, I think. And hopefully there is more we can do. That'd be great.
Be great.
So I think that gets us to number 4. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Leverage institutions as SNAP outreach partner. I mean, this is a possibility right now. We are enrolling new outreach partners. Well, I mean, there's 2 separate things here, really. We can have a connector, a SNAP connector, give an entity access to assist with SNAP applications, and they can be a part of the outreach plan potentially. So, but they don't have to be part of the outreach plan to be a SNAP connector. So that's where there's a little bit of separation there. But So when you talk about an outreach partner, they can do both things. So we talk about, we just make the note here that that's a possibility now. Because of the student rule and because of the challenges to eligibility for college students, you know, it might be right now a better fit for the community colleges versus the 4 years, but it's certainly a conversation we can have with any interested universities.
So what would be the threshold for a university, like I'm thinking about the 4-year partners, to be an attractive SNAP outreach partner for you? Would you want like a third of their students to be Pell eligible? Like what kind of metrics would you be looking at to make sure that your resources would be maximized?
So we don't have funding attached to these partners. So, I mean, if that's
It's just capacity?
we're not paying the partners we're enrolling, we're not funding their participation as a connector. So I just want to be clear with that.
So is
Not
the
that maybe
connector
we
like a
can't.
volunteer role?
Right now, it's organizations that already do this kind of work, already, help. We have food banks that are involved. We do have our Medicaid connectors that are funded through, they do have Medicaid funding. But then we also have some advocates that have become SNAP connectors. And so right now it's groups with an interest in this work. And so what we can do as an outreach partner is reimburse get a 50% reimbursement for the work they do related to SNAP outreach if they are a partner. If they're not, we just give them the access to allow them to help clients, potential SNAP applicants apply for benefits through self-service. And so I don't know that we could talk about that a little bit more. I think in some ways it relates to the navigator that's on further down. Maybe it could be part of that. Those two things I think could be connected, and it would be something a little different than we do now. But there's opportunity and we can flesh out exactly what that may look like. I just think Pell eligibility is one thing, but being eligible for SNAP is another, right? You might be income eligible, but if we can't get around that student rule, and that thus is the challenge for the 4-year institutions. If we're not able to get around that student rule, then there's not, we can do all the outreach we want, and they're simply not going to be eligible.
And I know that just having ended the pandemic emergency status, like has immediately affected the student rule qualifications, right? And so, so now it's like before, I guess it was, you just had to either be a federal work study eligible student. Like there were a couple of pretty big blankets that would apply to a good number of students on campus. So how what are some of the changes that make it, I guess, more restrictive for students now?
Yeah, Shelley, can you talk about what that change is? Do you have that?
I don't have it pulled up, Todd, but we could during the pandemic period accept their eligibility for Pell Grant, Zero Family Assistance, instead of requiring that they be participating in a work study program. It was just their eligibility. So that is going to end, for all of our students who became eligible under that temporary ruling.
Yeah, with the end of the PHE that ends. So I guess that'll end. June will be the last month of that, I think, right?
Well, it'll be phased in with their next recertification.
Okay.
The next case action, it will become effective.
Okay. Well, I know that that's definitely something that we want to help all of our campuses fully understand. And it sounds like the connector, becoming a connector, that there's probably a training process that you go through. And then it sounds like your activities that assist potential recipients with applying for benefits could then be reimbursed at 50% through the state. Is that?
Yes, if they choose to become an outreach partner, basically, and so what that involves in is a proposal to us on what their outreach activities are going to be, and then we write that into as part of our state outreach plan. And then once approved, it'd be a contract with that entity, and they would bill us, and then we would get half, we would be able to reimburse half of what they invoice us monthly for that work. Yep.
Great.
Let's see. So we had number 5.
Mhm.
Let me move this up a little. So add KCTCS as a full SNAP ENT provider. So we're in favor of expanding our relationship with KCTCS for ENT, but we're not in favor of adding them as a provider. And I say a better strategy would be expand the scope of their existing KVP agreement to support SNAP ENT participants. Basically, ask them to do the same work for ENT that they do for us now for the Kentucky Works program. Now, I think one of the things, or my assumption is one of the things, add them as an ENT provider. One of the goals of that is to remove that barrier or perceived barrier, as the case may be. But I agree that it is a barrier of us having those 5 initial providers that we refer to. And so one of the things we've talked about, and I know Commissioner Dennis is in favor of this too, is expanding really I view it as pulling back some of that ENT case management, pulling it back into DCBS. And so really aligning the ENT program more with the way we do our Kentucky Works, the way we operate it. We have case managers that do the initial assessment for Kentucky Works, and then we make a referral, whether it's to one of those 5 provider agencies. We know we use them for ENT as well, or whether it's to the community colleges or UK TAP or wherever it may be. We make that first referral, and it's not automatically to one of those intermediaries as they're kind of have become known by FNS anyway. So I think that would solve the problem of there being that barrier of that first referral and then a referral to KCTCS. It would be DCBS. If the goal is education, we could refer straight to whatever post-secondary, institution we're talking about, whether that's one of the community colleges or not. And then we would have in our contract services through all 16 colleges. We've made an effort since 2015 to add all 16 KCTCS colleges as partners for ENT. And, because of the challenges with participation and different things, that hadn't really worked out for us. But I think if we do it through the contract, then, we're paying for it. It's not them invoicing us for that 50-50 partnership. I just think that's a better plan. So there's definitely opportunity there. I think this could be one of the bigger things on the list here. So.
Oh, great. Well, I know that with KCTCS, they, had some success with the reverse referrals. So getting their current students that were receiving SNAP into an ENT, to get that additional benefit and supportive services. But the other side of it was the enrollment pipeline. And I think that's what they all saw as one of the major partnership benefits. So that's where, whatever the solution looks like, that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and I think that'll help with, I think that'll help with the direct referrals, as I said, from DCBS. Now, I do want to make the note that ENT participation, I mean, we don't have a lot of participants, period. So yes, the intermediary, that deal with those providers being an intermediary, I do agree that's a barrier for other agencies, but it's still, even without that, participation has been low. And that's something we're trying to address too with some other supports. But
Yeah.
anyway, it definitely will help. And I think it'll definitely, for those students we do have on campus, it'll definitely help with their supports.
Okay. And maybe, and I don't know, Todd, if this is on your plans in any time in the near future, but to look at the ENT incentives as a, is there an opportunity to update those, to hopefully maybe even encourage more students to consider it strongly?
Yeah, and I'm not sure what you mean by incentives, but
Oh, like the $25 transportation stipend.
Oh, yeah. So those, absolutely, transportation assistance and other supportive services, I would love to be, I think, would love to be able to offer supports, again, aligned with what we have available in the TANF, in our TANF funded Kentucky Works program. So it's on, Commissioner Dennis knows, on my wish list. It's one of my big things, is be able to provide transportation assistance for the ENT participant. So absolutely.
Okay. I think some other states have like really robust ENT incentives or supports that go along with being an ENT, including some tuition support and some other things. So there's probably a lot of things we could look at there.
Yeah, and I mean, that all comes down to funding. And certainly we've seen examples from Washington State. That's, the big one. And they have, my memory is they have a lot of community partners essentially throwing money at them. So that's not a problem we've had here in Kentucky, have enjoyed. So we have tried to make more supports available through our partners. And we have just a couple of those that do provide some participant supports. But for the most part, when we talk about making transportation assistance available, it's going to be a general fund budget allocation. So that's the reality of doing that here. Yeah.
Can I ask a question on, since we're kind of, before we go to childcare? Oh, no, actually, never mind. KTAP is down below. Yeah. We can just keep moving.
So, yeah, numbers, I guess we are ready for number 6. So Andrea, Philip, Tag, you're it.
All right, and I'm going to put Philip on the spot since he is the CCAP guru. And we have some other supervisors in here with us too. So Philip.
Okay. What we were saying here, we were having a conversation looking at number 6, trying to look at how we can possibly make it somewhat more flexible beyond what we're already doing. One of the, and I'm not sure really what the goal is, one of the things we were looking at is where it says permit each credit hour for education training to equate to 2 hours. We could look at doubling that. And at the same time, if by chance we're giving them credit for, they're taking 3 classes, which was 9 hours, so we'd give them credit for 18 hours with that, possibly looking at our 20-hour work requirement and seeing what can we do to make that work as well. Do we look at having that, saying that they only have to work now 10 hours because they're going to school part-time, or would our goal be to look at still requiring them to go full-time and modifying our work requirement hours? So we're trying to see what would be most beneficial. On that same note, trying to understand with our technical colleges, what is considered full-time?
Mhm. And so I would, if it's possible to maybe allow from the student perspective to say, you may choose to go full-time or part-time. And this is how we calculate the balance of school time and work hours. And so if you're a full-time student, maybe it's even reduced work hours. If you're a part-time student, it's this many. And so I don't know if that's already a part of it.
At this point in time, we're only considering full-time students. We're giving them the exceptions, and they do not have to work at all if they're going full-time. So our modifications would be around part-time, and then that would, of course, require us to make major system changes, but it can be done.
Okay, yeah. Because I think, the reality of, and even when you enroll in a class, they say for every hour that you're sitting in the class, you should expect to study for 1 to 2 hours in addition. And, then if the student's an in-person student versus online, is there travel time that could potentially be considered as a part of the equation? Those were some of the questions that we were.
Because you just answered one of the other things I was going to add to that. We do take into consideration travel time as well.
Mhm.
For the part-time
So by
students
chance, if
going-
someone's a part-time student, they could potentially have full-time childcare, looking at their travel time and all, taking all those factors into consideration.
Mhm. One of the other parts of the conversation that came up in our last Action Network meeting was around eligible childcare providers. And, Bobby, you may be able to chime in on this, or Amanda. But thinking about who, even if somebody has a subsidy for childcare, if they can't find an open spot for their kiddo, that still makes it a huge barrier for them in participating in post-secondary. And so thinking about some of the creative ways that people find childcare, whether it's, in-home care, and I'm just not sure if the policy requires it to be a certain kind of childcare provider.
So to receive any of those federal fundings, they do have to be a licensed and a state approved agency, or, go through the license and be regulated by the Division of Regulated Child Care. So that is a caveat because of all the health and safety standards and all those requirements that the CCDF puts on those to make them eligible. So we would still have to be very careful, but we do have a big push around registered relative providers and about certified family child care providers, and really trying to recruit more folks into that line of work because it's easier to sustain as a business model versus standing up an entire child care center.
So if you're a registered, you said a family member child care.
Yes, it's a registered relative provider. The reimbursement rate is lower than if they were certified or licensed, but it is a possibility.
Okay. That's helpful. That's really helpful. And then another question about childcare centers, like increasing the actual availability of childcare centers. And does the cabinet have resources that are available for maybe a college to start a childcare center on their campus?
Well, we had some funding available through the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act that we had offered. We currently have a couple of options, a community partnership grant that is a matching grant up to $100,000 for folks to start a licensed childcare program in their areas. That is currently open. We're doing a request for application, and There's a limit of 10 of those right now, and I think that closes May 15th. I can
no.
send you some information about that, and we can definitely have some conversations about what kind of support is there and to give some resources maybe to KCTCS as a whole to look at, is this something that would be sustainable and feasible throughout, the 16 sites across the state. That's definitely something we can do.
Yeah.
But right now in childcare, one of our biggest areas of concern is just finding workers that can work in childcare and that don't go to hospitality or retail because they make more and the requirements are less.
Mm-hmm. And I know that this would be maybe down the road and braiding various programs together, but there's also a program that's being funded by the ECMC Foundation around increasing partnerships between Head Start and community colleges. And if community colleges can provide the space for the child care center, then Head Start considers that the match, and they come in with the licensing and the capacity and the programming and all of the kind of HR elements that the college may be hesitant to take on. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that workers will magically appear for starting new Head Start programs, but it certainly is an interesting partnership to consider. And the ECMC Foundation, I believe, is funding the technical assistance for community colleges to start childcare centers in partnership with Head Start.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that, so I look forward to researching that a little more and see what kind of possibilities there are for us.
So does this funding end on May 15th, or do you just you have a limited amount and you'll get some applications by May 15th, so it might be reduced?
Yes. The RFA is open for 2 months, and then we will be making those awards.
Okay. And then they'll all be gone, or
hopefully, but hopefully we'll have takers, and if not, then we may be regrouping, and there may be another opportunity.
Okay. All right, great. So I know that with childcare, just before we transition maybe to the next section here, that is, I mean, it was a major topic of conversation at our last Action Network meeting. I think it even took me by surprise that this really was identified as a primary barrier for individuals that are considering their post-secondary pathway. And so really it just becomes an essential issue to try to tackle and think through, because not only do we maybe have some limitations around who can receive the subsidy, but then we just really have restrictions in the availability of childcare. And so trying to think about both of those
Absolutely.
issues.
I think that's, one of the good things and bad things of COVID is, it's really shown a light on childcare and how it is an industry that supports all other industries. And currently we have about 2,000 providers across the state, and our capacity is 160,000 slots for children, 0 to 5. And I think right now in Kentucky, we have ages 273 and 4-year-olds across the state, 270,000 rather. So, finding those places that are equipped to handle children and provide the curriculum and the care they need is a barrier. And it's not just here in Kentucky, it's nationally. We're seeing that and hearing about that on a multitude of calls.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Andrea, I don't know if you would be, or Philip would be interested in attending our upcoming Action Network meeting, but it's April 26th, and it'll be held at the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. It's a full day. It's like a 9:30 to 2:30 meeting, but I imagine we'll have a time where we're talking about childcare specifically and that particular issue that's risen to the top. And so would love your expertise.
Philip and Mary Busby will be attending that in my place. I'll be out of town, but we will have some folks there.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, I know we've only got 5 minutes left, so what else are the highlights, Todd, that we want to touch on?
Well, let's see. We've already taken steps for number 8. We've already made program changes. I think Carrie mentioned those at the last meeting I was on. So let me just look and see what the highlights are. I think well, there's some of these that I'm not sure land with us. Some of the post-secondary recommendations. There's some things down here where we still want to do some research on the HOPE program, Fun Campus Navigators. I think that, to me, that can go one of two ways. Is that and I know Commissioner Dennis, we talked about this, is that we've had DCBS case managers located on KCTC, well, at least one in particular, KCTCS campus in the past, and that worked out very well. It was, big success for, in my opinion, it was good for the students. It was good for the case manager there to be able to, have that contact with them. So definitely we'd like to explore that. And I think that goes back to that possible connector and outreach, depending on how we do that. So I think that's a good one. I think we still had quite a few to go. And I think, but I can send you this document, and Carrie can, I think maybe the next step is for her to look over these and provide a little more input on, let us know what the thought is on some of these, and then we can get it back and review and go from there.
Excellent.
Some of these down here at the bottom are what I was talking about. I think definitely 16, 17, 18, and 19 land with the universities, or I'm not sure about 19. Unfortunately, we don't have any funding that allows for housing assistance specifically. So that one's not one we can address, but otherwise I'll send this to you, Lily, and we will look forward to the next step.
That will be great. I'm curious if anybody else who's on this call is able to join the 4/26 Action Network meeting. If anyone was planning to. I hope you'll be there, Amanda. Co-facilitating. Okay, Reese will be there. Lisa, were you able to join us even for the beginning to maybe welcome? And okay, lovely.
Yes, I'll be there. And Todd, I think, I don't know, but Todd and Bobby will maybe be able to join us as well as a few others we had extended the invitation to. So
thank you.
Yeah.
And anyone from team here, Todd, your team is, please join us.
Yeah, I think any of my folks who are available certainly join. I'll plan on being there definitely some of the time. I do have a question. Did something change with the cafeteria meeting room? Is that still?
Yeah, I think we're still.
Yeah, they're only open until 2:30. So, just,
Okay.
yeah,
But
the
it's
meeting
scheduled
is until
till
2:30. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So good. I just wanted to be sure knew I'd seen something that changed about that, but it looks like that was a consideration. Very good.
So I'll send a follow-up email and just make sure if you do plan to attend, we want an accurate lunch count. So if you could submit an RSVP, that would be helpful. But yeah, I really look forward to seeing you all there. And our final meeting of the Action Network is going to be May 17th, and that will be a virtual meeting, but we hope to have some pretty solid recommendations and next steps in place. And so it might be great, Lisa, if we could, and make sure Carrie can join us for the next conversation, but prior to the May 17, make sure we're just all on the same page with both what's in the document of recommendations as well as what we think next steps will be as we move into some of the implementation steps.
Sounds good. So if you want to get something on the calendar, we'll work with Brittany,
Okay.
to get something scheduled. And the sooner, probably the better.
Absolutely. I hear you. This is a big group and a busy group. Okay, well, thank you all so much. This has been really helpful for me. And I'm sure that our next step will just be to share this doc with Carrie, and she'll get all of her thoughts included, and we'll schedule a follow-up conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Have a good one. Bye.
Everyone.
Bye.